Gonna go rogue because Howard made a good suggestion. Wynn and Sonia, since you guys are here, is there any comments you'd like to make about what you're hearing us grapple with, or what you know so far about the budget? We'd love to.
Is there tap dancing in gloom and doom?
You know, all the things that are listed here, you know, when I see some of them, I'm not as familiar with, for instance, what goes on at Pond Cove in middle school. Although I do know with Pond Cove, the thing about the recess aids was something that we've been dealing with directly in terms of planning time and how important that is in having those people there. And it seems like a small cost for freeing up all those teachers to be able to plan for serving our students. So that seems pretty important. You know, I obviously personnel is incredibly important here. In all the schools that I've worked at, you know, I've worked at all the schools. I've worked at 2 other schools, and I've never come across a more devoted staff. So who work incredibly hard. So you're getting a bang for your buck in that way. And I think the town has to understand that. Yeah, we do spend perhaps more than what the state suggests, but the education that your students are getting here exceeds what I've seen in other places. I have no doubt about that. I don't know whether you have any particular questions to ask me. I've been following all this. I'm kind of waiting to the point where you start to really talk about the nitty-gritty. I know this one thing, though, with Pond Cove that's really important to those people. I think about our custodians and how they are really overworked and feel stretched incredibly thin. And if you look at our buildings, you know, we talk about the shine or whatever that you were mentioning. Part of that is being able to keep the place looking good. And when we don't have enough people to do that, it's hard. So, you know, and even with some of the things you were talking about with projects, you know, you can walk around this school and you can come down to my classroom right now and take a look at it. And to me, it doesn't reflect Cape Elizabeth the way it should. And so, you know, all the funding here for this renovation, you're getting to the point where it's becoming really long overdue. You know, you go into the Falmouth schools, and even though their middle school is old, it shines. Their elementary school is beautiful. Their high school is beautiful. Yarmouth seems to be the same thing. So I think Cape Elizabeth has to ask itself, you know, how important is all of this to what the town really wants to stand for. And to me, the town's always stood for. You know, when I go around community to community, I always feel so proud to say that I teach Cape Elizabeth High School because I feel like the community really cares about schools. So. You know, I don't want to keep speaking here, but I just think that I hope the town recognizes what they're getting, and that yes, that it costs, and it's a disaster that the state doesn't want to pitch in their part. I don't know. Any questions specifically? And I would also say to the board that I've really appreciated your comments about supporting our schools. It means a lot to, I know, our teachers. You know, the things that I've heard from you makes me, and I think the other people recognize that you see that this is good and that this is worth funding. So.
Thank you, Wynn.
All right.
I saw you there, too.
Sonia, you want to?
This item, well,
There's one item that.
Oh, good.
yes, the item about the literacy, French, and Spanish teacher, it looks like, well, and I'm going to say that with big caution, that this can happen without any lowest number in the Spanish side. So we could have that support for students with reading skills are weak and create that position without any increase in the budget.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about the creation of a level 1 in Spanish or French. We may not have the numbers for that. But that portion for the additional support for literacy could happen without any increase, which would be great.
Thanks for giving us that.
I would also say something about social workers. They are really an important part of our schools. I think it's important to invest there so that eventually, at some point, we don't have to get to the point of getting a school resource officer. Because when we take care of the mental health of our students, when we have time to devote to that, we are, I'm not going to say better prepared, but we understand better our student population. We can intervene right away. And all social workers, in particular the high school, because those are the ones that I see, are certainly overworked. And they can intervene right away when there's a crisis. They understand all the players at the high school. And they can do sometimes, I would say, a better work than any outside therapist because they know exactly what they're dealing with. And I always, the first time when I have students who I can see struggle, I highly recommend them to access our social worker first because they do an amazing job. And those are positions where I think it's really worth investing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
You have Hope's hand up.
Oh, thank you.
So it sounds like we're sort of generally framing our opinions about where we come down in terms of, if, my understanding is if the budget's flat, we have a roughly 10% increase in the tax cost to the taxpayers. With these additional items, it goes higher. The architectural fees might add 3.6%. I just wanted to sort of reflect, or I agree with what Susanna said, that I believe that there's support for not, just because what happened at the state happened, doesn't mean that the people of Cape Elizabeth want us to go in and slash the school budget. I think that would be irresponsible of us to say, well, the state did this to us, so I guess we have to gut the schools just to make sure, taxes stay flat. I don't think there's, no one wants a huge tax hike, but I don't think there's a strong push for, well, you better make cuts to the school because we don't want to see another penny come out of our pockets. And I think most, of course, I have a limited experience because most of the people I talk to have children in the schools, but I would think if we present it as we want to maintain the quality of our schools, and this is what we have to do this year because we're being subjected to the wrongdoings at the state level, I think that we have support for that. So from my perspective, I'm okay with us going with the 10% tax increase, keeping the budget flat, and adding and moving these small items that we can, and working with that number.
Hypothetically, we go with a 10.8% increase, a higher one, and the town council approves it to put it out there for the vote. Is there any harm in presenting something that high? I mean, they would reject it or accept it. If they accept it, great. If the townspeople, the voters reject it, what? We don't want that. Can somebody explain, I mean, you're going back to the drawing board
With a new superintendent.
with a new superintendent.
I think primarily, that it's a headache in that you do have to go back, and we still don't know what the numbers are going through the summer. That's how I understand it. Yeah.
Because one of the things, the worry I have about that is what Howard spoke to about personnel. If you have to start getting into personnel issues and
Yep.
and
Thank
cut
you.
people then
Yep.
that puts them at a real disadvantage in trying
Yep, okay, that's why I was
Consider
asking the
that.
question for points like that to help clarify, thank you.
So, and the counterbalance of that, though, is to a certain extent, you know, we really need to know where the voters stand on some of this. It's like, if they do or they don't, because that's sort of what it kind of comes down to. And I think, you know, we want to have as thoughtful a process as we can, a principled a process as we can. You know, it concerns me overall. I do think we want to still go back and sharpen our pencil as best we can, but I think we want to do that starting with some of the things that we've talked about, putting back on the same footing as what's in there, and see where we come out. But then I look at it and I say to myself, you know, it's actually really, really hard to create something that's really good, like Cape Elizabeth school system. That's a really hard thing. We didn't do it. People before us, who came before us, did all that. It's also hard to maintain that. And that's our job, is to have stewardship over that. But unfortunately, when there's, you know, really good things, it's actually pretty easy to screw them up. And I worry that if we start really impacting, you know, cutting things that are definitely going to affect the education, that we could be screwing it up. Both from a facility standpoint and a staff standpoint. And so, there's part of me that just wants to say, this is what we think we can do in a difficult situation to maintain and have stewardship over this school system that we are so proud of. And if that's supported or not supported. I mean, that's sort of where I'm coming down on it. I actually, and I don't know what the result would be. I know it's not you know, no one's gonna be happy about it, but we don't have any happy choices. The choices are tax increase or impact our education, school system in a significantly negative way. I mean, like I said, our student populations are flat, our head counts are flat, our non-personnel expenses are flat. It's like, you know, and we're rising, our personnel costs are rising slower than the town. So that's where we find ourselves in, and to find out whether there's support for that or not. And then we have to do, I tend, what Hope said, be careful. Are we going to follow Augusta's lead that says, we think you should cut your budget? Do we agree as a town and as a school board? And I don't.
And I also just want to add to that, John, you know, in presenting this to the public, that this is, again, an exceptional year. And we can't get cut that much more like this in the next coming years. And so I'm hoping that this would be, you know, the, once
Assume that's wood.
underneath plywood, but, you know, I'm hoping that this would be the outlier year. And every now and then you have to have an outlier year. And I feel like that's where we're at, and I feel like what John's saying, we have to decide as a town, where are we gonna, you know, put our money where our mouth is, or however that saying is. I feel like we have to figure it out. Sorry.
So there are a couple of revenue, well, I don't know how we call it, or cost reduction, however, opportunities that are on the horizon that I think will impact this discussion as well, which is, you know, getting the health insurance number will give us a better picture. That can, it has made a significant impact in past years.
Right.
Which is something hopefully to look forward to. And the possibility of drawing down the undesignated funds a little bit more, you know, and then other, you know, decisions around possibly absorbing retired staff and things like that, other little, looking at, you know, different programs that might be in there that are nice, but maybe whatever. So, I want to be clear that I don't want, I'm not here to be like the voice of gloom and that sort of thing, and I also don't believe that the town's people want us to, we've got this $850,000 cut, we should cut that much. I also don't believe that. I think there's a middle ground to be found, though, is what I really do believe. And the middle ground isn't all from cutting, though, which is why I bring up the hope around health insurance and other things, that hopefully there is some movement and some way to make it more palatable. Because yes, it's exceptional, and I believe in what we're doing here. But, I do have a lot of neighbors who don't have students in the high school, or any school, in our schools. And, last year was the first time they voted against the budget. We talked about it a lot. They can't, so I don't wanna see our budget fail. And I think we need to think about that. And the reason we need to think about it sooner rather than later is I think that it needs to be done thoughtfully. If we say, okay, we need to find a way to get down to 7%, or whatever number we choose. I threw 5.5 out just as I don't know. I know that I really don't think it can be 10.8. It's not 10, it's almost 11. Howard and the administrators need time to make those incredibly difficult decisions. It can't be done quickly or haphazardly. So, at some point, we really do need to give that guidance. Maybe it's after we get the health insurance numbers. Maybe it's, after we've had these scheduled town hall type meetings and we really are taking the temperature of the townspeople. But at some point, we do have to figure that out, so that.
Well, in terms of that, I mean, it's all of these things, the additional meeting with town council, the public forum are going to be scheduled for after we take a vote.
Yeah.
I mean, we could look to change it, but that was what but we need to grapple with this. I think we need as a board to figure out where we stand, so that we can try to sell this to the public. They can either accept it or not. That's the only problem with that. But, in terms of guidance, I mean, I hear you. I mean, not everybody's gonna be behind this,
It's not a willingness, it's an ableness that I'm talking about.
But it's also both. It's also both. It's willingness and ableness. It's both. Not everybody's gonna be behind it. But I guess personally, I feel, I really wanna know what the pulse of the town is for this one year. So I'm leaning towards trying to keep it at, let's say, 10%, or 10.8%, or I don't know, that's where I'm falling. Nasser?
The normal increase, is it 3% or 4%? It's just been plus and minus, right?
I'm sorry?
The normal increase, tax increase, is in the sheet here, it's like 3% or 4%?
Yeah.
So we are asking the citizens basically to triple that.
But no.
And that's like taking us 3 years in the future, basically.
I really think we need to reframe the way this is being presented, because we're not asking the taxpayers to triple it, the state is.
Yeah.
So when the taxpayers go to the poll and go to the voting booth and say, are you approving the school budget, it's only increasing, it's practically flat. That's what we're selling, a flat budget. It's not what the town is doing to the school, it's what the state is doing. So if they have a problem with it, they can change their vote when it comes time for our state representatives and.
Or governor.
Or governor, but my point is, this shouldn't be about us, it's not, we didn't create the problem, we're not making the problem worse, we're just trying to run the schools the way we always have been, the way the taxpayers have been supporting up until now. So, and we should stop saying 10, stop saying 10.8% and say this is a flat budget.
Thank you.
How can you not support a flat
Thank you.
budget?
And I appreciate that.
Right?
There's
I'm
a
not saying you,
reality.
I'm just saying
No,
we.
And
it's where I'm at with my neighbors.
But if you look, Nasser, you know, at what the increase is for our school, it is flat. I mean, it's 3.5 this year, it was 2.4 the year before, 3.2. It's not like we're erratic. What's erratic is the end result.
Yeah.
Because of what we're not getting. And
And we have assured, I agree with you, we have assured the citizens also that the states are not going to change next year, because we heard from Rebecca. The states are not going to change in the 2 years or 3 years, because otherwise a citizen will say, if I pay my taxes this year, is the states going to turn around and give you that money back in 2 years or 3 years? We do not know that. We have to have an answer for that as well.
So, I think it's also, you know, the people who talk about the percent of the percent are the people who are against tax raises. Because it really becomes very, you know, you're taking a percent of a percent. And so all that does is magnify what's actually happening. And part of the reason that the number, the percent of the percent goes up so much, is, as Rebecca Millett said, is because the state acknowledges that property values went up. But that's not what you're being taxed on here in our town. They stayed the same. And so when you have a revaluation, it's net revenue neutral, and your value goes up and your rate goes down, right? But no one talks about that part of the rate. What we have ability to control is what our top-line budget number is. And that's always been in a very narrow range and responsive to our current situation. So the question is, how do we fund it, and how do we want to respond to that as a town? And I just want to raise again, because it's going to come up again. We're going to have the discussion, and they're going to say, what about all those people on a fixed income? And we've heard this speech 2 or 3 years in a row, and the answer is, you know, there are many good solutions to that. None of them lie with the school board. They lie with the town council and with the state in terms of what you have as your homestead exemption, whether you have local circuit breaker programs for people who are on those. We have no ability to do anything about this. The people we'll be presenting this to have had all this time that they're aware of the problem to do something about it. So we should not take ownership of that piece that drags us down to the lowest common denominator. That's not where I want to go with this. It's like, those problems are solvable, but they're not solvable by us. And pretending that that's a smart thing to do to drag us all down to the lowest common denominator is a mistake, because it's not. And that's not what this town stands for. And so we can't solve that problem. That's the town council's problem, and the state's problem to solve. We can put forward a responsible budget the best we can, sharpen our pencil the best we can, because we know it's a really difficult year. But we can try and do that and have as minimal impact on the education here in town that we've fought so hard to create. So,
so how do we proceed from tonight?
I'm going to suggest that we sort of take a straw poll, particularly around the items that were not in the budget, to whether we want to elevate them to the same status of what's in the budget. And then I think we've got to essentially direct Howard to say, okay, here's the pie you're starting with, sharpen your pencil, cut wherever you can, and how low can we get this number and still be as responsible as we can, and see what it looks like. I mean, I can't see any other way forward, so.
I would also recommend, we mentioned earlier about sharing resources, joint staff with the town. So if you really identify those people, and including the resource officer, most likely they will share with us. So even the existing staff that we have, really identify, even if they're not shared, are they really supposed to be shared or not? So that's going to help us with the budget as well.
So we should probably take a sort of a poll about the items that were talked about very specifically as to whether we'd like to see them back as part of the full budget, and before Howard goes through his exercise with the administrators. So should we just take a straw poll for support for the social work at the middle school? I would be in favor of that, on the same basis. And so, I would like also to support what Nasser had said, but at least for myself anyway, I'm not sure others agree, for the two small items of the lunch aids and the ed techs, which is about $25,000, I would put them.
Break those up.
Pardon?
I'd like to break those
Okay,
up.
so, okay. So for the lunch aids for the planning time. And for the ed tech. So,
That's it. 8,400.
yeah. Put that in.
What's in?
Bang for the buck, small dollar
Yeah.
item.
And then, the resource officer, sort of halfway on that one.
I know, me too.
Okay.
And that would be a town share position, so we would investigate that.
Mhm.
And then, do we have any sort of consensus, or how should we address the engineering fees? 'Cause my perception is that, we first ought to see how low we can get them, and then we should decide whether they're in or out. So,
But I'd like to, I don't want to see those ones offset by cuts elsewhere in the
Yes.
budget. I would like to see it treated as just an isolated item.
Yes.
I'm gonna
And
just
then
leave it out.
yeah.
If we
And
don't.
then when you see what
Yeah,
it is, you can decide
exactly.
what you wanna do with it.
Yeah. And with respect to cuts, I mean, I don't know if I've already said this, but I don't support cutting staff. But I think the idea of retiring,
Yeah.
absorbing retirements is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if I could reiterate so the board isn't willing to give a number for guidance to Howard, but, at least John's proposal is to ask you to get back with the administrators and try to
Mhm.
get it as low as possible.
Okay.
Is that am I being
Yeah,
reasonable
yes,
in
yes,
restating? Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I mean,
What about custodians and all of that? Are they out right now? You didn't vote on those.
We didn't, so we can, but I was not hearing a lot of support
Yeah.
for them.
Fine.
So,
Okay.
from the ones, so we sort of had.
So I'm showing
Yeah.
school resource officer, part-time ed tech 3, social worker, and lunch recess aides.
Yes.
That's it, right? Those are in. Got it.
Is there a way for us to get back the custodian that we hired last year?
So I think
Well,
that's
we
gonna
need-
work
we
for
need
this
to-
town
we need to
discussion.
weigh that out. We need to get that.
Just
That's a good
never
clarification.
give that one up, Howard,
No,
never.
I don't
So we
blame
can
you.
get that money back too.
No, I
Okay.
think we
Yes,
need to have that
yes.
laid out
Reimbursement
before
of
we
the
meet
old
with town
custodian,
council.
yeah.
So there was one last item that I just wanted to mention for the sake of thoroughness, which was something that Hope had expressed to me before, which is around gifted and talented program.
Mhm.
And we're not really increasing it this year, it's flat. We really ought to be looking to increase it, because even though there's a 2-year lag, it's funded. And it's unfortunate, if this were not an exceptional year, I would be pounding the table to say that we need to increase that. And again, I look at sort of our student population, and I think we've done a nice job really making sure that we've focused on special ed and some of the more challenged learners in our system. And we've done a less good job focusing on the other end of the bell curve in terms of the gifted and talented, and we do need to pay attention there. Increasing it this year is probably not the year, but it is certainly on my radar, and the mechanism exists to fund it, so.
I was gonna wait till Kathy Stankard was here to make that comment, but I agree, it might not be this year, and we only have 1 year with the director to judge on, but it looks to me that it's not adequate, and I'd love to see us do a thorough study to say, what would an adequate, robust program look like for our school district, because I think that's what we want, and then see, how do we get there? And let's not be shy about funding it, because it will be reimbursed. It won't be reimbursed this year, but if we had done it last year, we'd be getting more money today, so let's not be short-sighted.
The framework that we had discussed is looking at, our gifted and talented program should probably look like ones of comparable schools that we compare ourselves to every other time, or we should be able to explain why it looks significantly different, and we're not at that point right now, and we need to be.
Okay.
Yep.
So I-
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh. Quick question around, I agree. I imagine that that's not a limitless match, though, so, I think that needs to be done in a measured way, as in, if we
Yes.
say we need 10 gifted and talented teachers.
Of course.
I have a doubt that the state's gonna say, great.
Yes.
And so I'm curious what,
I'm not,
I'm
I'm not an
look- I
expert,
don't know
but I've
what it is.
actually done, like, some back of the envelope, looking at the other schools' applications and their funding, and you can get, looked about 10 districts, and you get $1 per head amount, and we're pretty far below the lowest of 10 different districts that I looked at. It ranges from $40 a head to about $100 a head, and we're about 35. So, you know.
hopefully Kathy, not Catherine, would know what is reimbursable for a school
An
department our
approved
size.
program, right, an approved program that
That's
would
what I'm
be in
curious
that,
about.
You're
in that
not
ballpark.
suggesting an
Yeah.
expanded program that includes custodians, are you?
I don't wanna
I'm
go
just joking.
crazy.
I'm just
on it.
joking.
Let's
That
not.
would not be approved, I'll just tell you that now.
Yes, Howard?
So, your next meeting, unless you want to add a meeting, is a week from tonight, the 27th. That morning, we have an administrative meeting, so all else, whatever was on the agenda gets pushed off, and we'll focus on budget. So that evening, when you meet, I can give you an update. Then your next meeting is the 3rd, unless you want to add another meeting. You could, but if not, then the next meeting is a week later, and then that pretty much would be the deadline for finalizing the proposal, which then you would have that night, and then you could sleep on it, and then come up back on the 10th and make your call. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's what we're gonna do.
Okay. I hope, I just wanna, I wanna say thank you for you saying, quit saying the,
I'm sorry.
No, I think that's the way we have to phrase it, we
Mhm,
do.
mhm.
And if we look at, you know, our record, our history, we're being prudent, we're being
Mhm,
careful.
mhm.
This is a bad year,
Mhm.
but we're still doing our job.
Right.
As carefully and thoughtfully as we have been,
Right.
so,
Okay.
all right. Is that it?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.